All right. Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Hope you're excited as I am for our stream today. GDO, Fluffy Blue Topaz, hi there, and welcome. Don't forget to check in, folks. Really important step, and something that sometimes forgetting to say. So, yeah, take it as a hint to check in. But yeah, how's everybody's Global Hack Week going so far? I hope well. Hey there, Skiddy. Good to see you. And yeah, why don't we go ahead and start with our setting up a virtual machine in the cloud. That'll be really fun. Yeah, good to see you too. All right, so yeah, basically virtual machine, hopefully you have used this before, but I wanted to first address an issue that I was facing in our last stream, and I figured out why it was causing me a problem. So let me show you all that. Oh, actually, I'll show it to you in Chrome. So here's the Chrome browser to just show you this. So we're checking AWS today, not Azure. But yeah, let me show you something from what we were doing last stream. Let's see here. How do we do it? So we went to IAM. I think you can just use this search bar up here. So you know, IAM and IAM Identity Center are two really different things. And I think I clicked on IAM Identity Center, and that I wasn't really prepared for that. So it gives you a totally different way of logging in. So if you click on IAM, first of all, we're using AWS account. If you want to register for an AWS account, I will send you a link in the chat to do that. Remember that free accounts, so they'll claim that there's these free accounts, right, in AWS, but actually the free account is only free for about, I think, 12 months. Yeah. So there are certain things that are always free. But there are other things that are only 12 months free. So here, have a look at this. These AEC2, S3, and RDS are all 12 months free. We're going to be using EC2 today. All right, so we're actually going to spin up a virtual machine. S3 is a storage for persistent storage. So you can use that for basically like storing your files. If you have a video or some big file you want to store, you can throw it on your S3 bucket. RDS is essentially like a SQL server. So you're going to have a relational database service. That's what RDS stands for. All right, and so here's a few other things for us to talk about. DynamoDB. So this is a serverless NoSQL fully managed database. And then we have SageMaker AI, which is, you know, basically a free trial. So be careful of that. It's not always free. AWS Lambda, we did a little bit of AWS Lambda practice in our serverless workshop, and we'll probably get to do some more of that today. This is interesting too. I've never looked into some of these things down here. As a Q developer, never looked into that. OpenSearch or SNS. I've never looked into any of those, but those seem cool. All right, so we're going to focus on EC2 today. And if we have some extra time, we'll go to AWS Lambda. But for now, let's talk about EC2. And basically EC2, if we click on it, it brings us here. So remember, this is 750 hours per month for 12 months free. So we're going to actually, I'm going to show you how to make sure you don't run up against your limit on AWS, because you really don't want to get charged on your credit card. So I'll make sure that there's a, we go over that pretty extensively so that you get an alert before even 1 penny gets charged to you, and can just disable that. But basically, EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. So you can choose many different operating systems, networks, storage, processors. And yeah, that just really helps out. And let's say that you have a Mac and you love to use PC software, or vice versa. This could be a great resource for you. There's also, other reasons to have such a thing, because you can have, access via an external IP and be able to serve content to other people around the world. So, yeah, I won't go through all of this stuff, but, there's a lot of different things here to love about, virtual machines. And EC2 is just one of them. I'm not sponsored by AWS or anything like that. We just want to give you access to some of the most commonly used, most popular services. So that's why we're looking at it. But yeah, first, before we go any further, wanted to make sure that I introduce myself. So I'm Steven, a Major League Hacking coach, and I'm really excited for our stream. I help out with other things other than Global Hack Week, so this is my last stream for this Global Hack Week. But I also come to hackathons, and I may come to a hackathon near you, and I work on our fellowship program as well. So we are currently reviewing applications for the summer fellowship program. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to ask a question about it. I'm totally happy to talk about it a little bit. But we will focus mostly on our workshop today. So here's our one slide VM overview, just to really give you all an overview of what exactly is virtual machine. And I talked about this a little bit when we mentioned EC2, but it is basically, a virtual machine that comes in various sizes. So a T2 micro is kind of like a micro machine in AWS that we can use for free up to these limits, of course. Here's Ajax. Hi there. Good to see you. And then there's operating systems. So there's lots of different operating systems. And then, of course, there's configurations that you can change. So if you need more CPU, you need more memory, you need more storage, those can be adjusted on the fly. And security settings. So we're going to talk about some of these security settings in particular today. We're going to implement a firewall, SSH. We're going to do all of that through the command line interface. So it'll be really exciting. And let me just, I think the details on exactly what we're going to get provisioned through AWS. So we get a 1 virtual CPU core, okay, and 1 GB of memory, right? So that's not a lot actually in the modern day world. Your computer at home probably has 10 times this. but it's good enough to run certain lightweight frameworks. We're going to be running one framework today called Nginx. And Nginx is a web server framework. So yeah, we'll just show how to get a brief web server up and running on this virtual machine. All right, so that'll be really cool for us to try out. So before we begin, I want to just mention that there is a way to set up your AWS free tier. So I think I showed you all the link to that in the chat, but I'll send it one more time because I think the link I sent was kind of a long one. So aws.amazon.com/free. That's where you're going to go. And so, yeah, let me go there myself. Yeah, so once you enter in all your information, you should get up to this dashboard. Okay, so here's the dashboard. And the dashboard is kind of complicated, honestly. And there's a lot of different services we can do. If you want, after this workshop, you can learn using some of these Welcome to AWS modules. They're really useful. I've looked at them myself. But today we're going to really focus on EC2. But let's go back to our slides, and I want to tell you about this tool called AWS CLI, which we can set up on our computer. So CLI stands for Command Line Interface, and it's a way of communicating between your computer and AWS. So I have over here basically what that link sends you to. I'll send it in the chat as well. But yeah, this link sends you over to basically a little Git book here that gives you the install commands. And so you want to go ahead and install for your particular operating system. In my case, this is the right one for me. So I clicked on this package file here and then went through the installation. So I'm going to give you just about 30 seconds if you don't have this already installed to go ahead and take it for a spin. All right, so hopefully you were able to get that working, and I'm going to show you what it looks like in my terminal when I try these commands out. So it's suggested that we try out commands like which AWS. And if you get a path like user local bin AWS, that can be really good. And then, another way you can test this out is by essentially doing the other command, which I think was testing your version. Yeah, AWS -version. And that can be another great way to do that. And so essentially here we have our Amazon Web Services CLI installed, but it's not actually connected to anything that we need to take a look at. So let's try and do that now. And we have on our screen here, we'll have to take a look. There it is. I want to make sure we have a way to access our AWS server through the command line. So I'm going to use IAM. And if you probably don't see this link here, you've recently visited. So you're going to have to go up to the search bar here. Sorry. But don't worry, you'll get these soon enough. So you type IAM. And then remember, this is something I learned in our last workshop. We don't want to go to IAM Identity Center. It's a little bit different than IAM. So you want to click on IAM. And it tells you the account ID, how to sign in. And click on the roles. These are a lot of different roles with specific permissions, policies. Here's what we're going to use, which is administrator access policy. So that provides full access to the AWS services. So we're going to create a user for ourselves that's going to give us full access to this, this terminal. And so let's create a user. I created one already, but we're going to do another one for practice. So if you didn't catch what I did there, I clicked on users, and then I clicked on create user. And what you're going to do is create a name. So maybe I'll just make one after our cloud. I'm going to make Cloudy. That's the name of our user here in honor of Cloud Week. And also it's pretty cloudy where I am right now. So seems like a pretty appropriate one. But yeah, so let's continue on here. We wanna click next and actually provide user access to the management console. Why not? Now it is best practice to manage a person if you want to give them access to your AWS. You don't necessarily want to do this, but yeah, here we're definitely not doing that. We're just creating a user for ourselves. Oh, actually, let's not do this. Uncheck this. Yeah, I don't want that. Okay, so we are now here in permissions options. And one thing we can do is add user to a group. So I created a group before, but what you can do is just attach policy directly. All right, so if you click on this rightmost option, you can get a list of all of our policies, and this administrator access policy is really going to give us basically full permissions to do whatever we want through this user. So that's what we want. We want to give Cloudy these full accesses, right? So then we click next. And we click create user. And by the way, when we create this user, it goes into our database here. So it's going to take a minute here, but it's generating an access key ID. And that's going to be really important for us because it's going to serve as our password, essentially, for getting in to the service through our terminal. Okay. Oh, it's taking quite a while here. Let's refresh and see what happens. All right, we're still okay here. Not sure why it says console access disabled. But so it does look like we have here our user created. And we can click on this create access key, and it'll build us basically a username and a password that we can use to enter into our CLI. So we'll click on CLI here. I understand the above, want to create an access key, and I'm going to give it a Cloud Week key, an access key, right? So we'll click Create Access Key. And so this is it right here. It's it's this username here, this long string of text, and then the password is sort of blurred out. I'm trying not to give all of you my password, but hopefully you were able to get to this stage. So if you weren't able to get to this stage, let me know in the chat, and I'm happy to give you some some pointers on how to maybe get there. All right, so now I'm gonna, assume that you all were able to create your own users. Maybe you gave your user a better name than mine. I gave my name Cloudy, but if you want to share your username in the chat, please do. Maybe you came up with a cuter name than I did. But one thing I'll say is never share your access key. That's really important because that's the way people get into your account. So you don't want to do that. All right, so one thing you can do is download a CSV file with this data. That can be really good for you to get. I am going to keep this tab open while I try to AWS configure into my server. So let's actually go into terminal. So we're back into terminal, and hopefully you all were able to follow along and your AWS login worked, in which case I'm going to ask you to use the following. So we're going to do AWS configure. Okay, so type enter, and I'm not going to actually paste my access key into here because it actually remembers my access key from last time. And I think it'll be a little more secure for our stream. So I'll just hit enter, and the secret access key also, I'm just going to hit enter. And so, then at that point, AWS might tell you the region name. It might tell you things like, the output format, and you can just hit enter here, even if it says none, which mine says US East 1, but if yours says none, that's okay too. Yeah, that's totally fine. And yeah, that's basically our AWS is configured now. So we can type in commands. I mean, we can create a bucket if we want. So this is what I was trying to do in our earlier session. So maybe I'll try to do it now again. Let me grab the code for this. We're going to try and create a storage bucket just to test things out. Okay. Oh, a question here. Love to see it. So, can we install AWS in Linux? Absolutely. So, I have it in Mac right now, but I'll show you how to do that. So, here's the link to how we got to this install page. And if you just at the top of this, if you just scroll down and you drop down under Linux, there's so many different AWS installers, command line interface installers for Linux. So definitely go ahead and try one of these. But great question. Okay, so what we were doing then was getting our S3 command, and if you don't remember from the before, S3 is a way we can store things. So I'm going to make an S3 bucket for us. So the S3 bucket, I'm going to use MB, which is the make bucket. And then I'm going to assign it some S3 address, so our identifier, you could say. I'm going to call it my demo GHD bucket. So if I hit enter, then you can see it's actually creating this this bucket for me. Oh, looks like it didn't work actually. Let's scroll down and there should be a reason why. Let's type AWS S3 and see if that works. Yeah, it should work. I wonder why we didn't get that answer there. Let's see what happened if we go up to our AWS S3. It looks like it created. Let's check it out. There it is. Yeah, I'm not sure why it didn't work. Let me try one other thing. Let's see here. Yeah, I think it may have not worked because it was already created here, but that's okay. So if you go ahead and look here, we have our bucket created. And in here, I placed a little file for us to look at called index.html. And if you go over here, it's actually publicly available. So if you copy this URL, if you visit this URL, you should see test. And you can see that actually it's serving this HTML file off of our bucket. How cool is that? This is what we call a static service. So, if you wanted to make a little web page that just shows something to the user, you could easily use a service like this. Of course, there's no dynamic element to it. So, the user can't, create an account and sign in and, start doing things. But yeah, it's a really neat idea to have one of these in your S3 bucket. Just you can put a website in there if you want. So, all right, we created an S3 bucket. And now I want to go back to our terminal and show you a little bit about what we're really trying to do today. But first I wanted to double check. I wanted to show you a really nifty thing that we can do called verifying our free tier eligibility. So this command line code is going to be great if you want to test and see if your service that you're interested in running is eligible for free tier. So I'll paste it into the chat. And what we're doing is we're testing if EC2, and specifically the T2 micro, is free tier, or if we can use it without paying. Okay, it says, please remove the link displaying on the screen. I will do that. Yep, no problem. But try to use that command in your terminal. So if you do that, show you, just pasting that in, and I hit enter, and it tells me true. So that means that we can use this EC2, which is what our next step is, a little more advanced than S3. We can use that in free tier. You don't have to pay for it. So that's great. That's great news. And let's continue on, and I'll show you some of the commands that we need to start with. So, I'm using EC2, but let's go to the EC2 dashboard and click Launch Instance. Okay, so I'll show you what this looks like now. Here's my previous code here. And you saw earlier we were making an access key. And now we're going to go to the EC2 dashboard. So I'm going to click here, EC2. And when we hover over EC2, we get our dashboard. So let's click there. All right, that's great. And you can see they give you a great information here telling you about, how many EC2 offers are you using right now? Are you going to exceed your free tier limit? I would not worry about exceeding your free tier limit during this workshop. After the workshop, you can just spin down all of your resources, and you will not get charged if you spin them down after this, right after this workshop. So I think that should be fine. So it's totally fine then for us to click this Launch Instance button, right? And so when you click Launch Instance, you're directed to this this page here, and we can create an image here, and I'll call this our cloud server. Maybe I'll call it our Cloud Week server. Why not? And so then we want to give it an image here, an OS image, which means operating system. So interestingly, Amazon can actually provide you a Mac OS image, but it's not free, I don't think. Let's see, because I think this is free. Free tier, so it says free tier eligible in the right corner here. If you click on Mac OS, confirm changes here, it doesn't say that free tier is eligible. So you wanna try something that is going to be free tier eligible, such as Ubuntu. All right. And so the next thing we got to choose is our instance type. And we have a few instances, and so for example, let's look and see what the craziest instance we can get is with just our account. Can't get any of this good stuff down here. We could theoretically get a 12 CPU, 96 gigabyte memory machine, although it would cost, oh my gosh, and look at this one, 24 CPUs, 192 gigabytes, holy cow. But that would cost $2 per hour. Yeah, they even just keep going up and up, hundreds of gigabytes of memory, dozens of CPUs. But yeah, we don't want to spend that much money today. We just want to use a free tier. So we go all the way to T2 Micro, which is our free tier instance. And I think I do usually create a key pair. Let me make sure that I have a, okay, I already have a key, so I have one here, but you could click create new key pair, and what would happen is it would download that key onto your system, and then you could use that to access this VPN. So you want to probably have this so that it's more secure when you connect to your VPN. That'll just really help you out. And then over here, we have our create security group. We can enable that. We want to allow SSH traffic. We also want to allow HTTP traffic. So just check off all of those because, yeah, we're we're going to serve an Nginx web server, so I want to be able to see that. And then let's see here, advanced details. We have some different things you can do. I'm not really going to play with those right now. Let me see my notes. I just want to make sure that I don't actually want to do something here. It's always good to check your notes before you move along so you don't get stuck. Goodness knows that it's easy to get stuck with certain things. All right, I think we're good. I think we're good. So let's just launch our instance then. We'll pray, pray that it works. And it's green, so that means that the launch was successful of our instance. And we can even visit our instance by clicking on this here. And we can see that it's running. So here's our Cloud Week server. And you can see that if we click into it, click into our instance ID, it has all these great options on it. One of them is our IP address. Okay, so this IP address here, I'll show it to you, 3.139.240.155. That is an actual address. And right now it says nothing. It just says this site can't be reached. But think about if I were to just type something random into here. So if I just type a random string, basically, nothing connects at all. It doesn't even send me back any message. So that indicates that this is sort of working, at least for now. And then we're gonna probe this a little bit further so that we eventually get everything working. But here's what we did. Okay, we selected a free tier operating system. We selected Ubuntu specifically, just like they suggested we do in the form as we went through AWS. We did T2 micro instance, so it gave us just one virtual CPU and 1 GB of RAM, but that's okay, that was enough. And we created a key pair. So hopefully you downloaded your key pair onto your computer. Save that, by the way, in a directory that is not shared with the rest of the computer. So you want to save that key value pair locally on your partition of the computer. Otherwise, it won't work. And then finally, we made a security setting. So we actually basically configured a firewall for our virtual machine. And we said, you're going to allow SSH, which is port 22. SSH is a secure shell. So you can actually make a connection through the terminal to this virtual machine. And then we also enabled HTTP access. So that's why when we ping this server, it could give us some information. Okay, so there we go. We're making a lot of progress here. And let me just skip ahead a little bit here because we did a lot of this stuff just now. And we're going to connect to our VM, or we're going to try to at least, by using SSH. And this will really verify for us and make sure that our machine is working. So let's go to our terminal. Here it is. Remember, we verified that our instance was free tier eligible. And we want to type the following. So we want to type that command that we had in the slides. I'll actually paste it to you so you can run this on your own and practice SSHing into your virtual machine. We're going to type I, and we type the path to your private key. So my path to my private key, I'll show you in a minute. I'm just going to copy it. It's in my downloads folder, as most of my Global Hack Week stuff is. And then I can just find the key. I have mykeys.pem. Yours is also probably named mykeys.pem. And then to SSH in, we need to give some kind of place where we're going, right? So we're going to Ubuntu at, and then we put the IP address. So my IP address and your IP address will be different. But you remember, hopefully, that this was my IP address. So if we hit enter now, it tells us that we need to make sure that we're okay with connecting. So I'm going to type yes and hit enter. And it added this IP to my known hosts. And boom, now we're seeing something different here. So I'm going to hide this comment. As Love Edits mentioned, I really should be better about hiding my comments. So I'm trying to be better about that. And you can see that the Ubuntu server is now running. So here is my system information. To see, it says documentation. Here's our system information. It's Tuesday, March 11th, and this is our time in UTC. And yeah, you can check it out. So we have about 6.71 gigabytes of use of storage here. Our memory usage is about 20%, and it tells us a bunch of other stuff here. It's 106 processes. This is all related to the Ubuntu distribution. It tells us we can run a command as an administrator using sudo, and we're probably going to go ahead and do that a little bit. Now, if you had an error, you might need to do the following command. I'll paste it in the chat so you can see. So if you did get that error where maybe your .pem is it's not private, they might tell you it's public. Go ahead and change the permissions in this way using chmod. Now that's going to change the permissions from public to private. So that you might need to do, but then you should be able to rock and roll with this. All right, so let's check out our slides now, and we'll see what we should do once we're connected. So the slides say that once we're connected, we want to run the following commands. So we're going to look at these two commands, lscpu, which I'll put in the chat, and free -h. So lscpu tells us about all of the CPU details, whereas free -h will tell you about the available memory. So I want you all to run these two commands and tell me what you observe about the output. So I'll give you a second to check on that. I'll do it myself while we wait. All right, so one thing you notice is the architecture. So this is Intel computer architecture, and you can see they have Intel Xeon here, CPU. And there's a lot of other information here. So threads per core, for example, is relevant. So threads is you could do multi-threading on a core to run processes in parallel. So that's possible. And then I will show you another thing that is interesting, which is the cache. So these are sort of like CPU memories, where you can cache information on the CPU. And then let's see, what else is interesting about this? Well, we can move on to our free -h command, which was the free memory. So you can see that we had 957 megabytes of memory, which is about 1 gigabyte of memory, as the Amazon dashboard told us we would get. And we're using currently already 300 megabytes just to run at, just to sustain everything. But that gives us 400 megabytes to play with, which is kind of cool. And you might ask, why do I only have 400 megabytes free if I have 600 available? Well, there needs to be some buffer always in case services ramp up or down. You can't use 100% of the memory because it would kind of freeze you out and you'd have really slow time. So we'll be okay with that. And it lets us now move on to our next topic, which is setting up the web server. All right, so any questions about this stuff from the chat? Anyone have any trouble getting their VPN set up? Great, so we'll continue along and set up our web server. So first, before we get started with that, we're going to type this command, sudo. Remember, sudo is how you run administrative commands. Sudo apt update. And this is a way to update all of our packages on this server to the latest possible versions. And that's going to be important for compatibility across the various parts of the server and different services and so on. And then another thing we'll type is sudo apt install nginx -y. And that will basically approve our nginx installation. And we can type systemctl status nginx to verify that nginx got installed. So let's try these out on our terminal. All right, so first one we wanted to try was sudo apt update. You can see it requires a lot of updates. It takes a minute to really do it. And it says that 135 packages can be upgraded. I'm actually really curious what those packages are, so I am going to type apt list upgradable. So yeah, all of these things could theoretically be upgraded, although we probably don't need to dive too deeply into it, but sudo apt update is a great command to run for this type of thing. And then we will type in sudo apt install nginx -y. And when we do that, it'll install our nginx web server. All right, so you can see it went through the whole process of installing those dependencies. So it installed nginx-common, and it also installed, it suggested these several different packages for nginx. So let's continue on and verify if our nginx worked. Okay, so love edits is saying no. I guess maybe are you having a trouble with getting this Nginx server spun up? Let me know. Otherwise, I am gonna continue and just verify. So you can see I verified that that Nginx is running. So over in the chat, let me know, were you able to get through these steps? Were you able to get your Nginx server running on EC2? Let me know. I'll tell you, one thing that's really cool to check is, why don't you go to your external IP address. So this is mine. You go to yours and tell me what you see, okay? All right, I'll show you what I see on mine. So if I go to this website, my external IP address, I get the following message. So check that out. Welcome to Nginx. And it tells me all about what I can expect from this web server. So we got our Nginx server running on our virtual machine. How cool is that? Anyone can see our website here. But this message is pretty generic, so I want to change it, and I can actually do that through the AWS CLI. So let me try that. I'm going to use Control-C to get out of here. If you ever want to exit out of, to quit something in your terminal, usually you want to type Control-C. I'm just going to give you that tip in case you ever need it, right? But yeah, so what we can try next is editing the index.html file. So what I'm going to do is type in sudo nano. Now, nano is a way to edit your text, the text of some file in your server using the command line. And you can, or the terminal, I should say, and you can find the script for the Nginx index by going to var www.html index.nginxdebian.html. I'll copy that into chat. Oh, okay, great. No means no trouble, can proceed. Awesome. So in that case, go ahead and proceed with this command. And this might be a little intimidating to you if you've never looked at HTML or you've never looked at Nano before, but I'll walk you through what we're looking at. So this is our Nano, and it's essentially working really similar to something like Microsoft Word or some kind of text editor. All right, so if you want to change something in here, you can move your cursor using the arrow keys. So that's what I'm doing right now, is this box is moving around. And let's say I wanted to change this title here. So I'm gonna change the title. I just highlighted this part here, and I'm just gonna type delete. Oh, I guess I can't do that, but I'll just type delete. And I'm gonna call this cloud site. And then maybe I'll change the color scheme as well, from light dark to light blue. And I'm going to leave the rest of those styles alone. And then for welcome to Nginx, I'm going to say welcome to Cloud Week. Now you can feel free to edit this however you'd like, just to proof of concept this here. And maybe I will put a link to our check-in, right? Wouldn't that be great if we could check into Global Hack Week through our server? So let's write check in for this event. And then we can actually use the A tag let's try and grab that check-in link. I know it's somewhere in my notes here. There it is, found it. Just check in for the event here, right? That'll be pretty good. All right, so hopefully that works for us. And then I'm just going to delete the rest of this stuff here. This is just telling us how to get documentation and various other things here. Just delete that. And then this is a really important part. I think a lot of people don't understand how this part of Nano works. So you can't just say Control S to save. You actually have to use the following to save. So we're gonna type anywhere, anywhere. Notice these commands at the bottom here. So this X here is actually with the caret, it's Control X. So that's the exit function. And so that's how we save. We're actually going to use exit. So you'll type Control X. So that's the first thing to type. So I'm going to do that right now. Control X. And then it tells me, do I want to save modified buffer? And you want to type Y. Y will tell it, yes, I want to save buffer. And then it'll say file name to write. And so it's telling me, where should I write this contents to? And you're going to want to keep that same name that exists right here, because what that's going to do is overwrite the contents of the file. So you're going to type enter. So that works great. And now we can move on and actually try and test out our website. So let's go to this website again. And I'm going to try to refresh it. And it looks great. It looks like we got welcome to Cloud Week. Doesn't seem like our light blue worked though, unfortunately. Love that it says it's working. So that's awesome. And I hope if you go to this website and you refresh, you'll see the same for your virtual machine. That would be awesome. All right, so just gonna take a quick, pause right now. I want to ask you all, what do you think of this? Does it seem to make sense to you at all, running virtual machine? What, why you might even want to do this in the first place? All the stuff with Nginx and sudo and nano and all these things. Let us know. Let us know how you're feeling about it. Yeah, so as Judeo says, Nginx is a web server. That's right. So you can use that to basically host any website. And this is different than S3. So if you remember our S3 bucket that we looked at before, S3 was essentially static. So if you want to deploy a static website, you don't really need a server like this. So, good question. What if I want to deploy static websites? So there's a few choices you can choose for static websites, and I'll give you some of them. So the best choice probably for most people's static website is GitHub Pages. So I'll paste that in the chat for you to see. We'll take a look ourselves. So GitHub Pages is a place where you can host your repository online, and all you need to do is push your changes to this particular repository, which you can call your project site or your user site. Like for example, here, this user has their name Sofshep, so they just put sofshep.github.io. And it's a really good way to do things. It's actually free. You can connect your custom URL that way. It's awesome. The other thing I'll say is Amazon S3 bucket. So for S3, you can actually use this as well. It's not free forever. It's free for 1 year at 5 gigabytes. So if the size of your website is 5 gigabytes or less, it'll be totally free for 12 months of use. That being said, you probably want to keep that in mind, that after that free trial period is over, I think the costs are around $5 per month. So it's not a huge cost, but it is a cost. The advantage is probably that you could keep things private, for example. So you could store private data on your server, your S3 server. It's probably a little bit easier to customize certain things because you don't have to go through GitHub pushing and pull requests, but it will have that cost after 1 year. So unless you want to, deal with that, then GitHub Pages is pretty good. How useful is a Nginx server after deployment to AWS? I guess it just depends on what you want to do. So if you are interested in a dynamic website, this is actually a great choice because the server can accept traffic and handle that traffic dynamically. So I would say vary, but it depends on your use case. So in your case where you're trying to deploy a static website, it might be overkill. There's other things that Nginx does, though. I'll show you a little bit. They have actually a website that says 20 years of Nginx. How cool is that? If you zoom in over here on the things that Nginx can do, it is an HTTP web server, but it can also do reverse proxy, content caching, load balancing, and be a proxy server for TCP or mail. So there's a ton of different use cases for Nginx that you could never get out of a static service like GitHub Pages. So it is kind of good to deploy an Nginx server if you wanted to do some of that stuff. But great questions all around about this stuff. All right, so I want to now transition. So we did talk a little bit about editing this file and creating a custom message with Nginx, but we want to also optimize and secure our virtual machine. So to do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about performance tuning. And so if you want to put your advice here in the chat, I know some of you've already added some comments along these lines, but I had a discussion question. Do you think you need more resources than just 1 gigabyte for a simple web server? And so just think about that a little bit. We're gonna look at the top of the resources here. Oh, the question is there any future stream about using Nginx? Not that I know of, but if you are interested in seeing stuff like that, definitely send it along in our feedback form. We're always looking for suggestions on what streams we should make next. So we can always take those as advice. Okay, and Ajax has another suggestion for you for using Nginx server. It could be used as an API gateway for routing and managing lightweight APIs or microservices. That's cool too. That's a really cool idea. Yeah, so all really good ideas. And if you want to see stuff like that, just fill out our feedback form. We'd love to see your suggestions. And who knows, maybe we'll create your dream stream. So let's go ahead and type top so we can see our resources here. And we'll see that we're using, this is great because we can see the percentage of resources that we're using. So we're using 0% of our CPU. Oh, okay, excuse me, 0.3% of our CPU. We're waffling on and off. And our memory, 1% of our memory, and that's probably just to hold all of the Nginx information in memory that needs to be held there, and probably also some background processes on Ubuntu. You can see exactly what is actively using our resources, and it's mostly Ubuntu. So, all right, that's really cool. Is there also an HTOP? Let's take a look. Yeah, there you go. So you can check that out in detail. Kind of a cool resource there. But yeah, I would say that for our current purposes, this should be sufficient, this resource for our simple web server. Now, if you start dealing with a lot of traffic, handling a lot of requests, you might need to upgrade. But for now, it looks to be doing just fine. Okay, and now we're gonna check out auto recovery, which is another really key part of AWS and why virtual machines can be really neat. And it's because you can auto recover. So imagine you have a server that's crashed at your house, and you may need to actually reboot that yourself, and it'll result in some downtime. In AWS, you can allow auto recovery to automatically recover an instance if it fails. And so this is a really good DevOps tool, and we're going to talk about it now in detail. So let me grab my notes up because I have my notes on how we're going to do this. I'm going to pull up our AWS console. All right, so we're in our AWS console. We're looking at EC2. Let's go to our dashboard, I think. Yeah, interesting. I actually have 2 instances running. Probably one is one that I was using earlier. Okay, yeah, this is one that I was using earlier. So maybe we'll delete this one because you can see how I have it. I actually have the alert set to trigger when CPU utilization is more than 1 for 5 minutes. And you can see we're actually seeing pretty high CPU utilization. So it's probably just triggering all the time. But let's delete this instance because I don't want to get confused between my instances. Perhaps it's a few details here. All right, we'll just stop this instance so that anything it'll just make it clear that this is the stopped one. But also, this one has a name, so I guess we don't actually have to worry about removing anything. We'll just use Cloud Week Server instance. Okay, so let's go over to our CloudWatch, which is where we're going to try and go for this purpose. And so you want to click on CloudWatch here, and specifically alarms. So just go ahead and click on alarms here. You can see I have an alarm already set up here. I'm just going to clear the I'm just going to create a new alarm. And to select a metric, we're gonna click select metric. We're gonna go down to here, and we're gonna look for EC2. Okay, there it is. So we click on that, and we want to click on per instance metrics. And specifically our instance ID, which is here, Cloud Week Server. And we want to select status check failed system. That's what we want to check. So you can find that by typing in status failed check system, I think, up here. But I just found it by scrolling to the bottom. Then so you just check that, click select metric, and proceed. Then we want to go down to our conditions. So do we want to use a static threshold, meaning if we reach some value, then we'll trigger this? Or do we want to use a band, some range, and say, okay, if we go outside of this range, that's strange. No, we want to use static. So we want to make an upper maximum limit here for our usage. So we click static, and I'll say greater than or equal to 1. Okay. So that's just going to make sure that we can have this trigger whenever this value is equal to or greater than 1. Okay. And so what we'll do now is click next. I believe we click next. And then for our notifications, this is where we're saying how we want to respond when this threshold is exceeded or breached. So we have this option to say in alarm as our trigger. And we want to click add notification. So we have this alarm, but we want it to be triggered by an EC2 action. And we specifically want to recover our EC2 instance as well as trigger the alarm. So when this metric is outside of the threshold, it will trigger the alarm. and then it will try to recover the instance. We can click next here to do that. Oh, I guess we don't need this section here. We can just delete the notifications because they come through the EC2 action. So we'll click next here. And we then have to just give ourselves an alarm name. So let's just give it auto recovery alarm for cloudy. And we will add some description. So we'll just say, I don't know, that triggers auto recovery. When system check fails. And we click next. So here it is. Here's our alarm and our auto recovery here. So, you know, when we do have a failure, it will reset and restart the system. And so it's previewed, and we'll just click create the alarm to finish our setup. And it has insufficient data right now, but it will, you know, within 5 minutes restart if it reaches this issue. Right, so if you get some kind of server crash, you would not have to wake up and get upset. That's great. You can sleep through all of your DDoS attacks. Excellent stuff. So, you know, that's great. That's really, you know, what we have for this part of it. And we can continue by talking a little bit about firewalls. So firewalls are another way to talk about security on your virtual machine. And in this case, we already did a little bit of this through our UI, but I wanted to make you aware that you can do this as well through the AWS terminal, this command line interface. So let's try doing that. Go back into my terminal. I actually think I closed out my terminal, so we're gonna have to re-log in here. Let's see, I think my SSH, grab my SSH command. So I had AWS configure. I don't think I need to do anything here. AWS configure, yeah, it's still working, which is great. And then the other thing that we wanted to do was go into this. I don't even think we need to do that, to be honest, AWS configure, because we're just shelling it in. And then we'll go to Ubuntu and our wonderful IP address. None of this HTTP stuff is necessary, of course, because we're not even HTTP. We're not even sending an HTTP request, we're sending an SSH request. So here we are in our Ubuntu again, and let's try out some of these firewall commands. So first one was sudo apt install ufw -y. So this just tells us, yeah, you have permission to install this UFW package. And what is this? Well, it's UFW, it stands for uncomplicated firewall. Okay, so if you want to set up some firewall, this is a great way to do that with your virtual machine. And first we will add a rule to allow, by default, it will just block all this traffic, but we'll add a default, we'll add an allow for SSH and another command to allow for HTTP. And then to enable these changes, we just type sudo ufw enable. It says command may disrupt existing SSH connections, proceed with operation, yes. And it says firewall is active and enabled on system startup. So there you go. And to check this firewall, we can type sudo ufw status. You can see here's all of our rules here. Okay. And another really important thing to do in securing your system is make sure that your packages are up to date and thus, relatively more free of vulnerabilities. So you can periodically do sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade -y, which will just essentially upgrade all of your packages. That's what we were looking at before. There was I think we had something like 132 different things that needed to be updated. So let's try that out. Goodness gracious, look at all that stuff. Sounds like a lot of things were out of date here. So yeah, security, it's not the most, I guess it's not the most well-known or the most popular part of, computers, but definitely the most, one of the most important. All right, so we got that working. And for a couple of other things to do, I have a quiz. So first, what was the purpose of configuring our firewall? Why do we need a firewall for our virtual machine? And Ajax already mentioned actually maybe why this would be important. I'll take this as an answer so that you don't have some kind of unwelcome traffic. It's a great way to restrict some unwelcome traffic. Now, it won't unfortunately protect you from DDoS attacks, but it will protect you from other types of attacks. People are sending requests that you don't want them to. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can real-time troubleshoot. So there's a few commands to learn about. So if your web page isn't loading, your Nginx web page, you can use sudo systemctl status Nginx and then check the logs. So you could use this command here, sudo tail, to check the end of that .log file. So I'm going to paste these commands into the chat. You can have them in case you want to look at them. So the first one is to check if Nginx is running. And the second one is to check your logs. Oh boy, it's not letting me paste that in. Hope that's not a technical error, but let's continue on. Just try to soldier on here. So we're going to try these out in terminal. See what we get. We'll try that first command, systemctl status Nginx. You can see it'll tell me a little bit about what's happening here in my server. And if I type Control-C, I can exit out of here. And then I'll type sudo tail -n 20 bar log nginx error.log, and that'll tell me what that end of that log file looks like. Now it didn't print out anything there, probably because we didn't have any error triggered, but that would be a great way to test if you've had some error. Okay. And so I have another quiz here, another quiz question. Which type of instance is typically free tier eligible? All right, so in the chat, feel free to try and answer that. All right, so I put that in the chat. The answer is the T2 Micro. Okay. The T2 Micro. And so then I think I have one more here. Which command is used to connect your VM via SSH? Let me see if I can find it, because it always bothers me too. I can never find this command. There it is. So you use your private key, your public private key, and you use your IP address of the place you're trying to connect. And remember, for this to work, SSH has to be allowed on your firewall. So there is a possibility, if you want, you can make your VM not allow that, not permit that. And so if you were to choose that option, you would not be able to SSH. But you can always connect through the console on AWS itself. And then I wanted to ask you all to name one security measure you configured on your VM today. So maybe there's a security measure that we took. It could also be security doesn't just mean cybersecurity protection. It could also mean recovering your data or safeguarding your data. I'll name one too in the chat. Hopefully this wasn't the one you were thinking of, but it's auto recovery. So that's one security measure to auto recover your machine, protect yourself against a DDoS attack by recovering fast, as we said. And another one I'll mention is firewall, which is much more traditional answer. So there's our firewall as well. Okay, and what I want to now look at is how we can actually disable some of this stuff. Okay, so we're going to try and delete some of these resources because we don't want to have them just giving, all the time, taking up your resources and have you get charged at some point for having them. So the things we had were our S3 bucket, and we can just click delete. If we type permanently delete, it should remove that for us. We also had EC2 resources. So we look at these resources here. So you have one resource running. And what we did was we just terminated that. Now, I don't know if there's really a way to delete that. It seems like you might just be able to stop it and be totally fine. Let's check here. Yeah, I think the way is really to just terminate. So once you terminate your instance, it should work. So just click terminate and or delete instance, and it will shut that down, and you will no longer be able to access it. So we can see our server. Hopefully it's still there. No, it's dying. Sad. All right, so that basically does it for our AWS. And then because we had some extra time, I wanted to walk you through the rest of the serverless workshop. So we'll take a few seconds to recoup for that, and we'll come back there. Okay, so this is just from an earlier stream where we were looking at serverless. And if you're interested in serverless, go ahead and check out our pre-recorded stream from earlier this week, where we found a way to make an endpoint that would reverse someone's name. So could change their name from Alice to Isla, for example. And we didn't get to think about a lot of this other stuff, though, like error handling, for example. So one way we could process an error handling here is to use try and catch. So we could actually enable that by changing our code by having a try bracket around this getting the hello world code, and a catch too. Oh, sorry. So the catch would send us a status code and some server error message. Let's see what else we didn't get to. So we didn't get to this part either, which is where we integrated an external API, and this is kind of a cool thing. So you can install node-fetch, and we would update our handler.js. So I'll show you exactly what that would look like in our serverless folder. Let's see here, so I'll open up VS Code so we can take a look at that. try to grab this for you all. Here's what we were working with before. We were taking a look at the VS Code interface, and we were playing with our serverless, and we can adjust the handler I'll show you how. You can adjust it in the following way. So I'm trying to make this even bigger for you all. It is kind of small. So we require our node fetch package, which allows us to fetch from external APIs. And particularly, we have this cool external API called Official Joke. So try going to this website. I'll show you what it looks like. So if you go to this website, it actually gives you a random joke. I hope it's not a really dirty joke. Okay, so how do you generate a random string? That's the joke. All right. And the answer is put a Windows user in front of Vim and tell them to exit. Okay, that's funny, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that's funny. You could say that's funny, but anyway, it's just a random joke. So when you go into the node fetch protocol here, we're going to use the following to make that joke. So we type const response, which is going to save the response of this fetch API into a variable called response. And this await command indicates that this can be executed asynchronously. So it means that we can wait a little bit to hear back from the API. And while we're waiting to hear back from it, we don't necessarily have to stop everything in our tracks. And then we can tell whether we've gotten a response or not by catching an error or throwing an error, excuse me, or we get the JSON content and tell the setup and the punchline, right? So that's one thing we did not really discuss in our previous workshop. And then there's another concept that we didn't get to that I'll talk about, which is testing. So we didn't get to testing, even though it's a really crucial part of what you're doing as a software engineer. And what is a test? Specifically, we're going to talk about unit tests, which is a kind of test. It's a software test that verifies the behavior of a small, isolated piece of code. And they're often the first step in testing your application. So we can use, you can use tests in our serverless framework. So we'll go back to our VS Code, and we'll create a new file here. So I'm going to save here a new file, handler.test.js. So we're going to create this to run some tests on our handler. And specifically, I have the following text. I'm just going to copy that from my notes to save time. And so the test returns a default greeting when there's no name provided. So we could verify this by giving it this empty parameter, right? We're giving a known input here. And then we're waiting the response, and we expect the status code to be 200. We expect the body to be serverless world, because we know that those are what we should expect when we get an empty string here. So there's our test. And then to run the test, we can actually type in our terminal npx jest. Okay, that's how we would run that. And you would just type yes to install this jest package. And it would tell us whether our test worked or not. Okay. So there's a way to have testing. All right, and so we're going to now wrap up because those were just some concepts we didn't get to cover in our serverless stream, but we still have a really cool stream coming up by Sagar. Let me put that up so you all can take a look. It's coming up really soon, just in about 15 minutes. 3 ways to run your app in the cloud. Neat. And the check-in link, I posted it in the chat for anybody who wants to take a look. But yeah, thank you all for joining, and I hope you enjoyed making virtual machines in the cloud. Take care.